In the deepest reaches of space, the Zorics had watched countless civilizations rise and fall, their superiority unquestioned. They had conquered worlds. Without mercy, no species had ever come close to challenging their might. The stars were their playground, and their empire stretched beyond what any being could imagine. They had seen it all, conquered it all, and destroyed anything that dared oppose them with an efficiency that left no room for weakness, no mercy for the weak. They were the pinnacle of evolution, the ultimate predators, and for centuries, nothing had ever even threatened their dominance. But then there was Earth, this small blue planet in the corner of the galaxy, a world so insignificant by their standards, so primitive, they thought it wasn't even worth a second glance. The Zorics had known about it for millennia, observed it from afar, cataloging its inhabitants, and noting their strange behaviors. At first, they thought Earth was just another of those fleeting civilizations, one that would burn itself out in a blaze of conflict and leave nothing but ashes in its wake. The humans were an odd species. They lived on a world constantly torn by wars, disease, and environmental disasters, yet somehow they always managed to survive. Somehow they always found a way to keep going. The Zorics couldn't comprehend it. Their society was built on logic and strength. They didn't understand how a species so frail, so fragile, could endure so much and still rise again and again. Every war they fought, every disaster they faced, seemed to only fuel their drive to push forward. The Zorics were used to seeing weaker species crumble under pressure, but humanity wasn't like that. They would be beaten down only to rise up again and start anew. When other civilizations crumbled under the weight of their own destruction, humanity rebuilt themselves, stronger, wiser, more united. They called it progress, and somehow it worked. The Zorics began to realize something far more unsettling than they could have imagined. Despite their advanced technology, their unbeatable fleets, and their flawless strategies, the humans had something they did not have, something they could not replicate, a drive and instinct to survive that went beyond all logic, beyond all reason. This was what terrified the Zorics. In the quiet corners of their warships, in hushed whispers among their leaders, they spoke of Earth not as a mere planet, but as a riddle, an enigma they could not solve. No matter how many times they tried to study it, they could not understand why humans kept pushing forward against all odds. And the most dangerous part of it was that they didn't even realize how dangerous they were. The humans didn't know their own potential. They were unaware of how their stubbornness, their refusal to give up, could become a weapon against any enemy, no matter how powerful that enemy might be. The Zorics believed themselves to be the greatest force in the galaxy. But the more they studied Earth, the more they realized how wrong they were. The humans didn't need fleets of ships or armies of warriors. They didn't even need advanced technology to be dangerous. They had something far more dangerous, something the Zorics had overlooked in their arrogance, something that could turn the tide of any battle, no matter the circumstances. The Zorics would soon come to understand that it wasn't their weapons that made them the greatest threat in the galaxy. It was their will. The Zorics were about to learn that they had underestimated humanity, and that mistake would cost them far more than they could ever imagine. Earth was a place unlike any other, a place where the impossible became possible, and where the will to survive burned brighter than the stars themselves. As the Zorics continued to study Earth, they couldn't help but be fascinated by its history, a history filled with constant turmoil, war, famine, and natural disasters. Yet somehow this fragile planet had survived it all. It was a cycle that the Zorics could never fully grasp. Time and time again, Earth had faced destruction, and yet it always came back stronger than before. The humans were a curious species. Their world was constantly on the brink of collapse, yet they never seemed to accept their fate. They never seemed to just give up. When the planet was ravaged by war, they rebuilt. When disease swept across the lands, they found cures. When their environment was dying, they found ways to reverse the damage. It was as if the very essence of the humans was tied to survival. No matter what, the Zorics watched as the humans fought wars that seemed endless wars, fought on every corner of the planet, each one leaving its mark on the Earth. And yet the humans did not surrender. Instead, they adapted. They found new ways to fight, new ways to survive. And as the Zorics looked closer, they realized that this ability to adapt was what made them so dangerous to the Zorics. This was not a species that would fall to brute force or overwhelming might. This was a species that would fight until the very end, And when all seemed lost, they would rise again from the ashes stronger and more united than ever before in the depths of the Zoryx warship. The leader sat in silence, their minds racing as they considered the implications of what they had learned about Earth. They had long known that their advanced technology gave them an edge over other species, but Earth had never been a true threat. Until now, they had underestimated the resilience of the humans, their ability to endure, their unwillingness to die. And now they were starting to realize the true cost of that mistake. But even more unsettling was the thought that the humans didn't even know what they were capable of. The Zoryx had encountered countless civilizations across the galaxy, but none of them had ever shown the same kind of endurance, the same kind of relentless spirit that humans possessed. And yet, the humans were completely unaware of their own potential. They were unaware that their mere existence could be a threat to anyone in the galaxy. The Zoryx watched as the humans continued to make progress in technology and society with every passing year. They were building new wonders, conquering new frontiers, and each time they faced a challenge, they rose to meet it. They had no concept of fear, no understanding of their own limitations. They simply kept pushing forward. This was something the Zoryx had never seen before, the closest thing the Zoryx had ever encountered to this kind of relentless drive were the predators of their homeworld, creatures that would hunt until nothing was left to hunt. But the humans were not like those creatures. They were more than that. They didn't hunt for survival, they hunted for progress, for a better tomorrow. And that was what terrified the Zoryx. The humans didn't just want to survive, they wanted to thrive, they wanted to change their world and their species. And the more the Zoryx watched, the more they realized that no matter how advanced their technology was, no matter how strong their armies, where they could never predict what the humans would do next. The humans were a wild card, a force in the galaxy that couldn't be controlled, couldn't be predicted. And that was what made them so dangerous to a species like the Zoryx, who had lived for eons, believing that their strength and superiority could crush any challenge. The Zoryx would soon come to realize that this small blue planet held a power that could not be ignored, and that even the most powerful empire in the galaxy was no match for the unyielding spirit of Earth. Aboard the Zoryx warship, a group of young Zoryx students sat in a sleek, cold classroom, their eyes wide with curiosity and fear as their teacher, a seasoned Zoryx general, stood before them, her face a mask of authority and cold calculation. She was about to tell them something they had never expected to hear, something that would change the way they viewed their place in the galaxy. The class had been quiet until now, but as she began to speak, the tension in the air thickened. The lesson of the day was one they would never forget. Today, we will learn about Earth. The teacher's voice echoed through the room, and for a moment, it seemed like the very walls of the ship itself held its breath. The students shifted in their seats, some eager, some nervous. None of them fully understood what they were about to hear. The teacher motioned to a holographic screen that flickered to life behind her. A vivid image of Earth appeared on the screen, the small blue planet surrounded by the vastness of space. The students stared at it for a long moment, unsure of what to think. It looked so insignificant, so fragile, compared to the grand empire of the Zoryx. How could this planet ever pose a threat to them? The teacher watched them closely as they looked at the image, and then with a slow, deliberate motion she spoke. "This planet is not what you think it is." Her words sent a chill through the room. The students leaned forward, some skeptical, others intrigued. "This planet has been under observation for centuries, and what we've learned about its inhabitants will make you question everything you've ever known about strength and power." The students exchanged confused glances, but said nothing. The teacher continued, "The humans are not like any species we've encountered before. They don't have the power of the Zeltrix, the advanced technology of the Felurians, or the warfaring might of the Xandians. They have nothing that should make them a threat. And yet they have something far more dangerous. They have a force that no other species can even comprehend." The room grew still as the students listened intently. The humans have something no one else in the galaxy has. They have an instinct, a drive to survive that is unparalleled. They have a spirit that cannot be crushed, no matter how dire their circumstances may be. The teacher paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. The students looked at each other in disbelief. How could a species so weak, so small in comparison to the mighty Zoryx, possess something so powerful? "You see," the teacher continued, The humans are like a wildfire. When one flame is extinguished, another rises from the ashes, stronger, more determined than before. They don't know when to quit. They don't know when to surrender. And that makes them a force that cannot be controlled or predicted. The teacher paced before the class, her eyes never leaving their faces. They faced extinction before more than once. But they've always come back. They rebuild, they evolve, and they adapt no matter how many times they're pushed to the brink. The students were beginning to understand, but not fully. It was a concept too foreign for them to fully grasp. How could a species like this rise from destruction time and time again? What made them so different from any other species? The teacher pressed on, showing them holographic images of human history, a world constantly torn apart by war, a species fighting against famine, disease, and environmental collapse. Yet somehow, every time it seemed like humanity was on the verge of annihilation, they found a way to survive and rise again. The images showed the brutal wars, the nuclear fallout, the destruction of cities. Yet in every case, there was something that stood out. The humans never stopped fighting. They never gave in. The teacher's voice grew more intense. They didn't just survive, they thrived. And every time they faced a challenge, they emerged stronger, wiser, and more united. The room was silent now. The students no longer saw Earth as a small, insignificant planet. They saw it for what it truly was, a place where something deeper, more powerful was at work, something the Zorics had never truly understood until now. A force of will that could not be extinguished, a spirit that no technology or weapon could ever defeat. And as the lesson continued, the young Zoric students realized the truth. Earth was not just another planet. It was a mystery, a riddle wrapped in the power of human resilience. And that resilience was about to shake the very foundation of the Zorics empire. As the teacher's voice echoed through the room, the students sat in stunned silence. The images of Earth's history flashed before their eyes. They saw the wars, the famine, the pestilence that had once ravaged the planet. They saw the fall of entire civilizations. And yet, they saw something else too. They saw humanity's refusal to die, humanity's refusal to give up. No matter how many times it had faced destruction, the humans always found a way to rebuild, to rise from the ashes like a phoenix from the flames. And this is what terrified the Zorics, the idea that such a small, insignificant species could possess such unyielding determination. The teacher continued speaking, her voice growing more intense with each word. Humans have faced unimaginable odds, and still they survive. It's as if their very nature is designed for survival. They don't simply endure, they push forward. They don't accept defeat. They make a way when there seems to be none. The holographic images changed now, showing a human city devastated by war. The buildings were crumbled, the streets empty, the sky darkened with the smoke of battle. But then something unexpected happened. The images shifted, and the same city was shown again. This time it was different. The rubble had been cleared, the buildings were being rebuilt, the people were back on the streets, and the sky was clear once more. The students were baffled. How could they rebuild so quickly? How could they make something new out of nothing? The teacher watched them closely as the realization began to sink in. You see, this is the nature of the humans. They don't just survive, they learn, they adapt, they evolve. They find a way to turn the impossible into possible. They look at what's left and create something new. They don't let the past defeat them, they use it to move forward. She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle in. They don't just recover, they grow stronger with each challenge they face. The room was now filled with unease. The students had always been taught that power came from strength, weapons, and technology. But the humans had none of that. They had nothing except their will to survive, their ability to learn, and their drive to never give up. The teacher turned to face the class, her gaze steady. The Zorics have never faced an enemy like this. We are a species of conquerors. We build our empire through force, through superior technology. But the humans do not fight like us. They fight with their minds, their hearts, their very souls. They fight because they cannot accept defeat. She paused for a moment before continuing. And this is where we made our greatest mistake. We thought that by destroying their cities and their nations, we could crush their spirit. But we were wrong. For the humans, their cities are not the heart of their power. They are just the surface. Their true strength lies in their ability to unite in the face of destruction and to build something new from the ruins. The students began to grasp the magnitude of what they were hearing. The teacher's words struck deep within them. A species that could adapt and rebuild faster than anything the Zorics had ever seen. A species that refused to stay down, no matter how many times it was struck down. This was something new, something that the Zorics had no way of preparing for, and the more they thought about it, the more they realized the truth. The humans were not a species that could be conquered. They could not be defeated by brute force, because their true strength was something the Zorics could never replicate. No matter how much technology they had, no matter how many ships they commanded, they could never match the power of human resilience. The teacher's final words rang out in the room. This is why Earth is feared. This is why humanity is a threat unlike any we have ever faced. The students exchanged uneasy glances. The lesson had only just begun, but already they understood the gravity of what they had been told. The Zorics were in danger of underestimating humanity, and that could be their undoing. The room was thick with tension as the teacher's words settled into the minds of the young Zoric students. Their eyes were wide with realization. They had been trained their entire lives to conquer, to destroy, and now they were faced with the unsettling truth that the humans were not like the other species they had encountered. They were not simply another race to be wiped out, another world to be claimed. The teacher paced back and forth, her mind focused on the lesson ahead. She knew that if the students were to understand the full scope of the threat humanity posed, they had to see beyond their own limited understanding of strength. She spoke again, her voice cold and measured. It's not just their will to survive that makes them dangerous, it's their ability to think, to innovate, to adapt in ways that no other species can even imagine. She paused to let the weight of her words sink in. Humans are not bound by tradition or rules. They are unpredictable, and they turn their weaknesses into strengths. While other races rely on brute force and technology, humans rely on something far more powerful, their minds. The students shifted in their seats. The idea of relying on something as intangible as the human mind was foreign to them. How could something as abstract as intellect be more dangerous than technology or weaponry? But the teacher wasn't done yet. When the humans are faced with a problem, they don't simply try to overpower it. They find a way to solve it, to outsmart it, to think their way out of a corner. They take their greatest challenges and turn them into opportunities. The teacher's eyes locked onto the class. This is why the Zorics cannot afford to underestimate them. She turned to the screen again, and a new set of images appeared, this time showing the human race's greatest achievements, innovations that had reshaped their world. Cities built on top of crumbled ruins, technologies that had allowed them to conquer diseases, harness the power of the stars, and even begin to venture into space. Take a look at this, the teacher said, her voice heavy with warning. These are the kinds of innovations the humans have created. They took the ruins of their past and turned them into the foundation for the future. Their cities may have been shattered, their people may have been broken, but they never lost sight of their vision for a better tomorrow. The images showed human engineers rebuilding the planet, creating sustainable technologies from the very materials that once destroyed it, transforming their world into something no one had ever thought possible. The Zoric students were speechless. They had never seen anything like it before. They had expected to see a species crippled by war, struggling to survive. But instead, they saw a species that turned every obstacle into a stepping stone, every defeat into a lesson, learned a new direction for progress. The teacher continued. It was not just their inventions that set them apart. It was their ability to come together, to unite. When their world was in danger, when their people were threatened, they didn't fragment. They didn't turn on each other. They found a way to work together. Despite their differences, their unity is what makes them dangerous, their ability to rise above division and focus on a single goal. She paused to let the gravity of her statement land. When the humans are united, there is no force that can stop them. She could see the growing understanding in the eyes of her students. They were beginning to grasp the enormity of what they were being told. But it wasn't enough. Yet the teacher's voice softened slightly. They have faced extinction many times. Their planet has been torn apart, and yet they never die. They are like weeds that refuse to be uprooted. They keep coming back, and when they do, they return with new strength, new ideas, new hope. The students felt a sense of dread creeping into their hearts. They had been taught that the key to survival was power, the key to ruling the galaxy was strength. But the humans had something far more dangerous, something that could never be defeated by simple weapons or war. They had the will to live, the will to evolve, and the will to unite. No matter the cost, the teacher ended the lesson with a chilling thought. Remember this: when you face the humans, their power is not in their weapons, it's in their hearts, their minds, their spirit. And that is a power the Zorics have never truly understood. The class was silent now, each student deep in thought, processing the realization of what they were up against. As the Zoric students left the classroom, their minds were clouded with questions, fear, and uncertainty. No longer could they see the humans as a weak and primitive species. No longer could they dismiss Earth as a minor obstacle in the grand scheme of the galaxy. They now understood that the humans were a force that could not be easily overcome, a force that would not yield to the might of the Zorics Empire. In the halls of the warship, whispers began to spread. The lesson had shaken the core of their beliefs. The idea that there was a species out there capable of defying all logic and reason was unsettling to the Zorics. They had always believed that power came from conquest, technology, and force, yet here was a species that had no super weapons, no fleets of ships or planetary defense systems. And yet they survived, they thrived, and their spirit seemed to only grow stronger with each challenge. They faced a young Zoric soldier named Crash, had heard the lesson in silence, his mind racing. As he walked down the long metallic corridors of the ship, the other soldiers were talking among themselves, discussing the lesson, but Crash could not shake the feeling that something had changed within him. His entire worldview had shifted. It was as if the very foundation of his training had cracked wide open. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that the teacher's words were not just a lesson about the humans, they were a warning that the Zorics had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated the humans. They had failed to see the true nature of their strength. Crash was not the only one struggling with the lesson across the Zorics warship. Other soldiers were grappling with the same unsettling truth. The Zorics had always relied on their technological superiority to crush their enemies. But what if technology wasn't enough? What if the humans had something greater than weapons, something that couldn't be measured or counted by machines? Crash turned a corner and entered a small chamber where high-ranking Zorics officers were gathered. They were deep in conversation, discussing the ongoing campaign against the humans. Their voices were low, but filled with urgency. Crash stood at attention as one of the officers turned to him. Crash, the officer said, "What are your thoughts on the humans after the lesson today?" Crash hesitated, unsure of what to say. The truth was he didn't know what to think. His training told him that strength came from power, and that power came from technology. But the humans didn't have that. They only had their will to survive, and that made them a far more dangerous enemy than he had ever imagined. He cleared his throat and spoke. "They are not what we thought. They are stronger than we believed. They have a power that cannot be destroyed." The officer raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Crash's voice was steady, but filled with uncertainty. "They don't just fight for survival, they fight to overcome, to evolve. They adapt faster than we can destroy them. They don't give up even when everything seems lost." The officer was silent for a long moment before nodding slowly. "You are not wrong, Crash. This is the very reason the humans have become such a threat. We underestimated them. And now we face a greater challenge than we could have imagined." Crash felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The Zorics had never faced an enemy like this before, an enemy that couldn't be destroyed by force or weapons, an enemy that would rise again and again, no matter how many times they were knocked down. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized that the humans were not just fighting to survive, they were fighting for something far greater. They were fighting for their future, for their place in the stars. And that was something the Zorics could not understand. "What do we do now?" Crash asked, his voice barely a whisper. The officer looked at him, his gaze hard and cold. "We adapt, we change our tactics. We must find a way to break their spirit, to show them that even they are not invincible." Crash nodded, but deep down he knew that the Zorics had already made their greatest mistake. They had underestimated the power of human resilience, and now they would have to pay the price. The humans were not just another enemy, they were the enemy, and the Zorics would have to fight in ways they never thought possible if they wanted to survive. The Zorics warship drifted silently through the vastness of space as Crash and his fellow soldiers continued to reflect on the lesson that had shaken their world. Everything they had been taught seemed to crumble before their eyes. The humans were not just another species to be conquered. There was something else entirely, something that could not be measured by weapons or technology. The officer's words still echoed in Crash's mind. The humans had something the Zorics had never encountered before. They had an innate ability to survive and adapt that no amount of firepower or strategy could overcome. The decision was made: the Zorics would no longer rely on brute force alone. They would have to outthink the humans, outmaneuver them in ways that the Zorics had never done before. But as the plans were drawn and the tactics were discussed, there was a deep unease among the ranks. Even the officers, who were known for their confidence, could not shake the fear that had taken root within them. The humans had proven that they would not be easily defeated, and the Zorics were now questioning whether their superior technology could even match the strength of human resilience. The first clash between the Zorics and humans had been devastating, but it had also been a wake-up call. The humans were not going to bow down or surrender. They would fight with every ounce of their being, and they would use every tool at their disposal to ensure their survival. The Zorics generals had seen firsthand how the humans fought. They used every advantage they had in ways that the Zorics had never anticipated. They didn't simply rely on advanced weapons. They relied on their intelligence, their creativity, and their ability to find new ways to solve problems. And that was what made them so unpredictable. The Zorics had always prided themselves on their ability to control the battlefield, to dominate through strength and technology. But against the humans, it seemed like no matter how many battles they won, the humans would always rise again, each time stronger and more determined than before. This realization weighed heavily on Crash as he stood in the command center of the warship, looking at the holographic map of Earth. The humans were scattered across the globe, but they were not disorganized. They were building, they were strategizing, and worst of all, they were adapting faster than the Zorics could anticipate. Every move the Zorics made was countered by the humans with a surprising level of efficiency and innovation. Crash felt a deep sense of frustration as he stared at the map. He knew the Zorics were on the verge of a breakthrough in their campaign, but he also knew that victory would not come easily. The humans were unlike any enemy they had ever encountered. The officer entered the room, his expression grim as he approached Crash. "We have underestimated them too long," the officer said. "They are not just fighting for survival, they are fighting for something greater. They are fighting for their future, and they will not stop until they achieve it." Crash nodded, but deep inside he questioned whether even the Zorics were capable of understanding what the humans were truly capable of. "They won't give up, will they?" Crash asked. The officer shook his head slowly. "No, they won't. And that is what makes them so dangerous. They are relentless in their pursuit of a better future. No matter how many times they are knocked down, they always get back up." The weight of the officer's words hung in the air as Crash realized that the humans were not just fighting for themselves, they were fighting for their place in the stars, for the chance to explore and conquer the galaxy. Just as the Zorics had done for centuries, the humans had a fire within them, a drive to push forward and to overcome anything that stood in their way. And it was that fire that the Zorics would have to reckon with. From this point on, the battle for Earth would no longer be a simple conquest. It would be a fight for survival, a fight that the Zorics had not fully understood until now. Crash felt the fear rise in his chest. But he knew one thing for certain: the Zorics were not prepared for the humans. The humans had already proven that they could adapt faster than anyone else in the galaxy, and now the Zorics would have to find a way to stop them before it was too late. The tension aboard the Zorics warship had reached a boiling point. Every officer and soldier understood the stakes now. The humans had proven to be far more than just an obstacle. They were a force to be reckoned with, a force that would not relent no matter what was thrown at them. The Zorics had always believed in their superiority, their technology, their weapons, their vast empire. But now they found themselves questioning everything they had taken for granted. Crash stood at the observation deck, looking out into the endless black of space, his mind racing with the thoughts of the battle ahead. The humans had already defied the Zorics in ways they never expected, and they would not stop fighting no matter what tactics the Zorics employed. The officer who had spoken to him earlier walked up beside him, his expression grim but determined. "We cannot afford to falter," the officer said, his voice low. "If we hesitate, if we allow them to dictate the terms of this war, we will lose." Crash nodded, but deep down, he felt a growing unease. There was something about the humans that unsettled him, something he couldn't quite grasp. They were unlike any other species he had encountered before. Their resolve was unshakable, and their ability to adapt was unmatched. No matter how many times they were knocked down, they always got back up, the officer continued. We have to hit them hard. We can't give them the time or space to regroup. We have to break them. Crash turned to face the officer, his voice filled with uncertainty. But can we truly break them? Can we really defeat a species that refuses to stay down? Can we stop them from rebuilding every time we strike? The officer's eyes narrowed. We don't have a choice, Crash. We have to make them understand that resistance is futile. But Crash wasn't so sure. He had seen the humans' resolve firsthand, and he wondered if they could truly be broken in the way the officer hoped. He had watched them rebuild after each defeat, and each time they grew stronger, more determined, more unified, and that made him question whether the Zorics could ever truly defeat them with sheer force alone. As the Zorics prepared for their next assault against Earth, they faced a difficult decision. Should they continue with their current strategy, or should they reconsider their approach? The humans had already shown that they were capable of learning and adapting faster than the Zorics could anticipate. They had already outsmarted them once, and Crash feared they might do it again. It was a problem that gnawed at the back of his mind. No matter how many ships they sent, no matter how many weapons they unleashed on Earth, the humans would not stop fighting. And that was what made them so dangerous. The officer's voice broke through his thoughts. Crash, we need a new strategy, a decisive strike. We need to hit them where it hurts. Crash turned to face the officer, his gaze steady. And where exactly do you propose we strike? The officer hesitated, but only for a moment. We go for their heart, their unity, their will to survive. If we can break, that if we can shatter their belief that they can win, then we might have a chance. Crash felt a chill run down his spine. The humans' unity was their greatest strength, and the officer's suggestion to target, it was not something he took lightly. But he knew the officer was right. The Zorics could not afford to simply keep fighting on their terms. They had to break the humans' resolve once and for all. And the only way to do that was to undermine their belief in their own survival. But as he listened to the officer's plan, Crash couldn't help but feel a deep unease. There was something in the human spirit that defied all logic and reason, and he wondered if even the Zorics could truly understand that power. What if the officer's plan failed? What if the humans simply adapted again and came back stronger than ever? The thought was unsettling, but Crash knew one thing for certain: the humans were not going to go down easily. No matter what the Zorics did, they would keep fighting. They would never give up. And in that thought, Crash realized something far more important than any strategy or weapon. The humans' greatest strength was not in their ability to fight, it was in their refusal to ever accept defeat. And that was what made them the greatest threat the Zorics had ever faced. As the final assault began, the Zorics fleet moved toward Earth, their ships heavy with weapons and technology, ready to strike at the heart of humanity. But as they approached the planet, Crash couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. Every move they made seemed to be anticipated by the humans. Every tactic they employed seemed to be countered with an uncanny precision. It was as if the humans knew what they were going to do before they even did it. Crash stood on the command bridge watching as the ships maneuvered into position, his mind racing with doubt. The plan had been set. They would strike the human defenses hard and fast. They would break their unity by targeting their cities, their leaders, their infrastructure. But as the Zorics fleet descended on Earth, it became clear that something was wrong. The humans were not reacting as expected. The cities that were supposed to be in chaos were eerily quiet. The leaders, who should have been hiding or fleeing, were calmly coordinating their forces. It was as if the humans were ready for this. It was as if they were expecting it. The Zorics fleet began their bombardment, unleashing a torrent of firepower on the surface of Earth. They targeted the major cities, the military bases, the industrial hubs. They hit them with everything they had. And yet the humans did not crumble. They did not break. Instead, they began to fight back with a fury that the Zorics had never imagined. Crash watched as human forces rose from the ruins of their cities, organized and determined. They were everywhere, not just in the cities, but in the forests, the mountains, the deserts. They had prepared for this. They had been preparing for years. And they had found a way to fight back with whatever they had at their disposal: makeshift weapons, homemade technology, and the most dangerous weapon of all, their sheer determination to survive. The humans were not just defending their world, they were defending their future. They were defending everything they had built. and everything they would ever become. Crash watched as the human forces struck back against the Zorik's fleet with precision and tenacity. They used the very technology that the Zoriks had underestimated to their advantage. Old satellites were repurposed into weapons, power grids were hacked into and turned against the invaders, and in the midst of it all the humans were not only fighting to survive, they were fighting to win. Crash turned to the officer beside him. "This isn't what we expected," he said, his voice filled with disbelief. The officer nodded, his face pale with shock. "They are too resilient, too unpredictable." Crash realized then that the Zoriks had made a grave mistake. They had underestimated the humans. They had thought they could break them with technology and firepower. But the humans had turned those very things against them. They had used their resilience to adapt faster than the Zoriks could react. And now the Zoriks were on the back foot. The tide of the battle was shifting. The Zoriks had the numbers and the firepower, but the humans had something the Zoriks could never replicate. They had the will to fight. No matter what, they had the strength to rise again after every defeat. And as Crash watched the humans fight with everything they had, he understood what the teacher had meant when she said the humans' power lay in their hearts and minds. It was a power that no amount of technology could match. The Zoriks had no choice but to adapt. But it seemed that every move they made only strengthened the humans' resolve. With each setback, the humans came back stronger, more unified, and more determined. Crash felt a pang of fear deep in his chest as he realized that no matter what the Zoriks did, no matter how many times they struck Earth, the humans would keep fighting. They would never give up. The Zoriks had underestimated the humans, and now they were paying the price. Crash turned to the officer one final time, his voice steady, but filled with a deep understanding. "They are unstoppable." The officer didn't reply as he turned back to watch the battle unfold. He knew it was too late. The humans had already won. They had shown the Zoriks the most terrifying truth of all. The Zoriks could conquer worlds. They could destroy cities. They could decimate entire fleets. But they could never defeat a species that would never give up.